In Berlin handed the German government a final note stating that unless they were prepared at once to withdraw their troops from Poland, a state of war would exist between us. I have to tell you now that no such undertaking has been received, and that consequently this country is at war with Germany.
A new breed of codebreakers would be required to unravel the mysteries of the Enigma. The Secret Service set about finding their people. The interviewing began.
I was interviewed by the head of the military section, who was a funny bloke. His German was very rough and ready. All he really knew was the swear words, rude words, and names of ladies' underclothes.
Code breaking was a somewhat esoteric profession, but it wasn't clear exactly who would make a good code breaker. People who were recruited were asked whether they did crossword puzzles, and if they said they did and enjoyed doing them and did them well, that was generally enough to get you in. We discovered people of a whole variety of backgrounds did very well. Anthropologists, Egyptologists, paleontologists, and even an occasional lawyer turned out to have the knack.
I was reading German at University College London, and I thought, well, really, I ought to do something better for the war effort if I could, because I was concentrating on German romantics, and then I realised that when the German romantics were overhead, they were probably half the trouble with what was happening with nationalism and so on. And so I said I'd train to be a nurse, and when I told the authorities, they said, oh, no, you don't. You use your German. So then I thought, right, Mata Hari isn't in it. This is going to be an interesting job, seducing Prussian officers. But it didn't work like that. I was just sent to Bletchley.
In Elizabeth's days, when nights wore stays and beards grew wild like barley, the erudite called me Raleigh and the ignorant called me Raleigh. For a man who shines, this is the Tandy verse, for a man who shines in so many lines, an alias is handy, so give me a ring in the naval wing as Lieutenant Commander Tandy.
Geoffrey Tandy was recruited early on. He had been a marine biologist.
He was an expert in cryptogams. They are a very elementary form of biological life. And somebody said, cryptograms, oh, that's what we want, we'll send them to Bletchley, with the slight error that they were really looking for people who are good at cryptograms.
Station X recruited academics, chess champions, crossword fanatics, and, to suit the new mechanical challenge of the Enigma, large numbers of mathematicians were sought out. The old boy network was hard at work.
I was just about, very unwillingly, to start to revise some lectures, and in came Welshman. He'd been my supervisor, you see, at Cambridge, and then he'd suddenly disappeared, left Cambridge, and the rumour was that he was working in some place at Bletchley, top secret work, you see. So he explained to me that in fact he was doing that, and would I like to come along and join him? So I was delighted not to have to get on with this revision.
These young men and women were some of the most brilliant minds of their time, and along with their new talents, they brought new attitudes.
Bletchley Park represented different layers of knowledge and experience. There was certainly some sense of a bit of a generation gap there. A gap between people, some of whom had just come straight from school, and people who would have been their masters at school, who might even have taught them mathematics. I was young at the time and felt very, very strongly that there were some people there who were not thinking as quickly as we were. It was the arrogance of youth in part, although I try to look at the arrogance of youth with the humility of a historian. Looking back upon it, I think probably we were a little bit more cocky in some of the things that we were doing than we would have been in later phases of our own lives.
At that age you can just take fire and blaze away half out of your mind with enthusiasm and dedication. You're not married, you don't have to worry about the kids and the rent and so forth. And during that sort of short period of your life, you can live like a madman and, you know, take almost no sleep and determined to do it.
The people who a few years earlier were regarded as too young and not knowing anything of importance, or not being real people, not being significant grown-up people, suddenly they were the people who held the keys to the Reich.
If the Germans ever discovered what was about to happen at Station X, the whole enterprise would collapse. Secrecy was paramount, to the point of obsession. Some didn't even know what they were being recruited for.
I was taken into the admin office, where there was a driver waiting, and he said with perfect seriousness, "Do we blindfold her or do we use the covered van?" And ultimately they used the covered van. I was shut into the back of a blacked-out van and taken to Bletchley, which struck me as rather absurd because, of course, when I was at Bletchley, I had to know where I was. But I did gather that I had to sign the Official Secrets Act, that I must never, ever say to anyone where I was working, except to say Box 101 Bletchley, that I must never, ever tell anyone about any of the work I was doing or anything about Bletchley Park.
We knew other people were doing something, and no doubt they were doing quite well, but we didn't inquire.
I think it was impressed upon us as soon as we got there that you just talk to your colleagues, and you don't talk about your work to anybody else. Fair enough. I mean, if you've been brought up all your life to be truthful and honest and obey rules, you continue to do that.
I think that I shall never see a sight so curious as BP. This place called up at war's behest and peopled by the strangely dressed, yet what they do they cannot say, nor ever will till Judgment Day.
Oh, at least half of the people there were, I would have thought, outside Bletchley, absolutely mad. They were geniuses. No doubt many of them were extremely clever, but my goodness, they were strange in ordinary life. Josh Cooper, for example, who was the boffin that we were most concerned with on my watch, he would walk round the lake every summer evening with a coffee cup, and when he'd finished his coffee, he would look